Lab 13, configuring shared resources. If you're continuing directly from Lab 12, before you proceed, you'll want to close the open windows. Lab 12 requires your Client B virtual machine to be running, Windows 8.1 Enterprise, and your Client C virtual machine running Windows 8.1 Enterprise. Since you're only sharing resources between the two computers in this lab, you may not need the Server 2012 server running if you have the VMware DNS added to the virtual machines alternate DNS tab. So we'll want to log out the domain administrator, and Lab 13 requires a lab configuration for, so we'll have to do the configurations for task list for the two virtual machines that we'll be using. Because our Lab 13 requires a Lab 4 configuration, and that configuration is a workgroup computer instead of a domain computer. If you want to use the virtual machines you've already built, you will need to create a snapshot. Future labs have you use the same virtual machines. So you'll need to create a snapshot before you make any changes from your Lab 3 configuration to your Lab 4 configuration, so that in future labs, if you need the Lab 3 configuration, you can go back. Also, after you make the changes for the Lab 4 configuration, you also want to set a snapshot so that if anything goes wrong during the lab, you will be able to return to where you were at. So some of the other things that you'll need is on both Client B and Client C computers, you'll need a local user called Oliver Cox with a default password. So you want to create both of those accounts on each one on each virtual machine. And they're local user accounts. The IP address and the DNS server we're going to leave configured the way we already have them configured. The virtual machine names, we will leave them the same. And before you configure these last settings, if you're still a member of the domain in your current setting, you want to create your snapshot and then disjoin the domain. So to create your snapshot, right click on the virtual machine, select Take Snapshot. Since this is the Lab 3 configuration we're still in, we're going to type Lab 3, Take Snapshot, and then I'm going to do the same thing to the other virtual machine and give that a few seconds to save. Take snapshot, lab 3 config. I have my servers paused right now so that if I disjoin these virtual machines, their computer accounts will remain active in the domain, so that when I revert the snapshot, I will not have to rejoin them to the domain. And I'll know that my snapshots are saved when this saving state in the bottom left hand corner reaches 100%. So I'll know when my virtual machines are finished saving their snapshot when in the bottom left hand corner it changes back to showing the input message instead of a percentage for the saving. Now I'm going to disjoin my virtual machines to change them back to workstation. And you do that on the System tab, or the System dialog box, sorry. Right click on the Start menu, select System, now before you actually disjoin, you want to make sure you have another admin account that can log into the virtual machine. So we'll double check our admin settings in the computer management console. So I have my student user. That's a member of the administrators group, so I have a local admin called student. So when I disjoin my computer, I'll still be able to log in with that account. And then we'll check our client C virtual machine for the same thing. I just want to be sure when we disjoin our computers we can still get back in. So on my client C computer I have the same thing. Local admin called student is the administrator, local administrator for client C. So now we can disjoin our computer now that we know we can get back in once we disjoin the domain. To disjoin a computer, the domain controller does not have to be active or have an active connection. So click Change Settings in the System dialog box. Click Change again so that we can select Work Group and this time we're going to type in work group instead of a domain. So this is how you disjoin a computer from the domain. It'll ask you for your computer name. It'll ask you for a permissions for adatum.com. It has your domain admin credentials stored from the last time that we logged in as a domain admin. So it should still allow it to disconnect. And now we're joined to the work group called work group. To make those changes, it needs to reboot. And we'll do the same thing with client C, since it asks to do so in the lab config sheet. So right click the start menu, select system, right click the start button and select system. Click change settings, click change, again select work group and type work group. Select OK. Again, it'll ask for your domain admin credential. Close and restart. So our client B virtual machine is starting. Then after it comes up, join to the work group called work group. Now we can set the rest of the settings that they have listed. So my first virtual machine has come back up from disjoining it from the domain and joining to the work group called work group. So now we want to log back in and set these last three settings, and if you haven't have them configured already, the network and discovery will actually be on the left. The instructions for that are here. So let's log in and do that. We know that for mine, student is a local admin on this machine, so it will be able to make these configuration changes. Yours, whichever the local admin is for your virtual machines, is the one you'll sign in with to make these changes. And you noticed now that they're not joined to the domain, all of the users created on the computer actually display on the screen, allowing someone to select them. My other virtual machine is evidently installing updates, so we'll do these 3 steps on client B. So I'm going to open the Windows control panel. Click Network and Internet. Click Network and Sharing Center. Click Change Advanced Sharing Settings. The Advanced Sharing Setting dialog box appears. In the currently active profile, select Turn on Network Discovery and turn on File and Printer Sharing options. So we actually have 2 profiles going on right now. The one now being all networks and the other being unidentified or public. So in the public folder sharing, we want to turn on sharing if it isn't already. And then click Save Changes if it isn't already saved. Now we need to set our maximum password age. To prevent our password expiration. To do that, we'll want to open up the local group policy editor console. To do this, we want to browse to the computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy folder. Actually, the instructions in the lab setup guide are a little bit off when talking about changing the password expiration on a workgroup computer. The settings they list there are for a domain computer. So if you try to do what they say in trying to open the group policy editor, you'll get an error message that you need to be joined to the domain. So where you really need to set these is in the local security policy window. So in the control panel and administrative tools, local security policy. And then we'll expand account policies, expand password policy, or select password policy actually. And then we can see the current local policies. And then we can see that in the lab setup guide they want you to change the default value of 42 to 0 for the maximum password age. Now we had set that when it was a domain computer, but since we disjointed the domain it reset it back to what it was before because it no longer has group policies applying. So we can close that window. So now what we'll need to do is the last step of configuring our virtual machine. Which says create a standard user called student, which we already have a user called student and he's an administrator. So we'll leave it the way it is for now and see if we can do the lab this way, since student is our, at least for my computer, a local administrator. If it's not a local administrator on your computer, you want to create a student called student. And you do that in the computer management console. Users dialog box. So if you needed to create a new student, you would right click in here and click new user. For mine, I'm going to actually create student 1 and use that instead, since this is asking for a standard user and my current student is admin. So we have student 1 create. So now I have my checklist for my client B computer done, and then we'll need to do those last 3 options on the computer C. Still doing updates, so I'll pause the recording until it's done doing the updates. The Windows updates are still going on. It's been quite a while now, so I'm going to let them finish, but I'm going to end the recording here and call this section setting up Lab 13, and then after the virtual machines are set up, I'll create another video actually doing the steps in Lab 13.